I'm Margaret, 28 years old, and I thought graduating with my MBA from Yale would be the proudest moment of my family's life. Standing in our backyard in Greenwich, Connecticut, surrounded by white and gold decorations I had personally arranged, I watched my father Harold pour champagne into crystal glasses. My mother Beatrice stood beside my sister Diane, both wearing fake smiles that never reached their eyes. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across our perfectly manicured lawn, but something felt terribly wrong. When my father handed me that specific glass with my initial etched on the side, I noticed his hands trembling slightly. Before I tell you what happened next, please let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one, because what my father did next changed everything. Growing up in the Westfield family mansion meant living in a world of privilege that somehow never extended to me. My father Harold had built Westfield Insurance into a multi-million-dollar empire, while my mother Beatrice was a partner at one of Connecticut's most prestigious law firms. Their success created a lifestyle most people could only dream of, but for me it felt like watching a movie I wasn't allowed to participate in. From the time I was 16, I worked part-time jobs to pay for my own expenses. While my younger sister Diane received a brand new BMW for her 18th birthday, I rode the city bus to my job at the local grocery store. When the family planned their annual vacations to Martha's Vineyard or the Hamptons, they somehow always forgot to include me in the arrangements. Margaret needs to learn independence became their standard explanation whenever relatives questioned my absence. Our house on Maple Avenue was a testament to their success. 8 bedrooms, a swimming pool, tennis court, and a 3-car garage filled with luxury vehicles. The grand staircase dominated the foyer, leading to bedrooms that felt more like hotel suites. Diane's room was decorated with designer furniture and had its own sitting area, while mine contained hand-me-down pieces from various relatives. The pattern continued through my college years. While Diane attended private university with full financial support, I worked my way through state university, taking out student loans and working 25 hours per week in the campus library. My parents attended every one of Diane's lacrosse games but missed my graduation ceremony, claiming a last-minute business emergency. After college, I spent 2 years working at a small marketing firm in Hartford, living in a studio apartment and saving every penny for graduate school. When I was accepted to Yale's MBA program, I thought this would finally be my chance to prove myself worthy of their respect. The program was demanding, requiring me to work at the campus coffee shop while maintaining a rigorous course load. I studied until 2 in the morning most nights, fueled by determination and too much caffeine. My academic performance was outstanding. I maintained a 3.9 GPA and finished in the top 5% of my class. My thesis on corporate social responsibility received recognition from the faculty and was selected for publication in the school's business journal. Despite these achievements, my parents showed little interest in my progress. When I called to share good news about my grades or accomplishments, conversations were brief and felt obligatory. The financial strain was constant. My studio apartment near campus cost $1,200 per month, which consumed most of my income from the coffee shop. I survived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, shopping for clothes at thrift stores, while my family spent thousands on designer wardrobes. The contrast was stark and painful, but I convinced myself that earning my MBA would finally bridge the gap between us. As graduation approached, I decided to organize a celebration that would showcase my success and bring our family together. This party would be my statement, my proof that I had achieved something meaningful despite their lack of support. I spent weeks planning every detail, determined to create an event that would make them proud. Planning the perfect graduation party consumed 3 weeks of my life and nearly $2,000 from my carefully guarded savings account. I wanted everything to be flawless, from the guest list to the menu to the decorations. This wasn't just a celebration, it was my chance to show my family that I had succeeded on my own terms. The guest list included 35 people, a mix of classmates, professors, and family friends. I hand-designed the invitations using cream-colored cardstock with gold lettering, personally delivering them to our neighbors and mailing them to my Yale connections. Each invitation included details about my academic achievements and a heartfelt message about celebrating this milestone with the people who mattered most. Coordinating with my mother about the menu proved challenging. Beatrice seemed reluctant to host the party at all, making comments about the inconvenience and expense. Eventually, she agreed to allow the celebration at our house, but insisted I handle all the arrangements myself. I hired a catering company that specialized in elegant events, selecting a menu of grilled salmon, roasted chicken, seasonal vegetables, and an assortment of gourmet desserts. The champagne was my splurge item. I ordered 6 bottles of Dom Perignon from the wine shop in town, spending nearly $300 on just the beverages. The shop owner congratulated me on my graduation and threw in crystal flutes as a complimentary touch. I also purchased a case of premium wine and various non-alcoholic options to ensure every guest would have something special to drink. Decorating the backyard became my artistic project. I chose a white and gold theme that felt sophisticated and celebratory. White tablecloths covered the rental tables with gold napkins and centerpieces made from white roses and baby's breath. String lights were hung between the trees to create a magical atmosphere for the evening portion of the party. I even hired a photographer to capture what I hoped would be precious family memories. The day before the party, I was in the kitchen finalizing details when I overheard a conversation that stopped me cold. My parents and Diane were in Harold's study with the door slightly open, their voices carrying down the hallway. "Tomorrow will be interesting," Harold said with a tone I had never heard before. "She's been taking advantage for too long," Beatrice replied sharply. "Finally, someone will put her in her place," Diane added, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Their words hit me like a physical blow. Taking advantage. Put me in my place. I had worked for everything I had achieved, never asking them for financial help or support. The conversation made no sense, but the hostility in their voices was unmistakable. I tried to dismiss it as work-related stress or some other family issue that didn't involve me. That night I stayed up until 3 a.m, checking and rechecking every detail. The catering delivery was scheduled for noon. The photographer would arrive at 1:30. Guests were invited for 2 o'clock with the program beginning at 3. I had prepared a short speech, thanking everyone for their support and sharing my excitement about starting my career in corporate finance. The morning of the party dawned bright and clear, exactly what I had hoped for. I woke up early and spent extra time getting ready, choosing a navy blue dress that was professional yet festive. My makeup was carefully applied, and I styled my hair in an elegant updo that would photograph well. Standing in front of my bedroom mirror, I felt confident and hopeful. When I arrived at the house at 11:30, the catering truck was already there. The team worked efficiently to set up the food stations and bar area. Everything looked exactly as I had envisioned, elegant and welcoming. The photographer arrived promptly and began taking pictures of the setup and decorations. However, I noticed immediately that my family seemed distant and uncomfortable. Harold barely acknowledged my greeting, giving me a brief nod before retreating to his study. Beatrice was polite but cold, making minimal conversation and avoiding eye contact. Diane appeared smug, wearing a slight smile that seemed inappropriate for a family celebration. As guests began arriving at 2 o'clock, the contrast became even more apparent. My classmates and professors were warm and congratulatory, eager to hear about my plans for the future. Several family friends seemed uncomfortable, exchanging whispered conversations and glancing nervously between me and my parents. The atmosphere felt charged with tension that I couldn't understand. By 4 o'clock, the party was in full swing, but the undercurrent of tension had only grown stronger. My Yale classmates were discussing job offers and future plans, while my professors praised my academic achievements and thesis work. Dr. Williams, who had supervised my capstone project, spent 15 minutes telling other guests about my research on sustainable business practices and its potential for publication. Despite the positive energy from my academic connections, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with my family's behavior. Harold kept checking his phone and seemed nervous, fidgeting with his tie and avoiding conversations with guests. Beatrice was going through the motions of being a hostess, but lacked any genuine warmth or enthusiasm. Most concerning was Diane, who appeared to be suppressing laughter, as if she knew something amusing that no one else understood. Several family friends who had known me since childhood seemed uncomfortable and kept looking at me with expressions I couldn't interpret. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door, approached me with what seemed like sympathy and asked if I was feeling well. The question struck me as odd, since I felt fine, excited about my achievement and grateful for the celebration. The photographer had been capturing candid moments throughout the afternoon, but I noticed that whenever he tried to take family photos, my parents found excuses to step away or avoid being grouped together with me. This was particularly hurtful since family photos had been one of my main motivations for organizing the party. As the afternoon progressed, I decided it was time for the champagne toast I had been planning. This would be the highlight of the celebration, my moment to thank everyone and share my excitement about the future. I approached Harold and suggested we bring out the Dom Perignon for a formal toast. "Of course," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'll get the special bottle." Harold disappeared into the house while I gathered the guests in the backyard's central area. Everyone seemed excited about the toast, holding their regular wine glasses and chatting among themselves. After about 5 minutes, I became curious about what was taking so long and decided to go inside to get the serving tray I had prepared earlier. Walking through the back door into our kitchen, I expected to find Harold struggling with the champagne bottles or perhaps looking for the right glasses. Instead, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Harold was standing at the granite kitchen island with his back turned to me, carefully pouring champagne into crystal flutes. What stopped me completely was watching him take a small plastic bag from his pocket and pour white powder from it into one specific glass. The glass had my initial M etched on the side, a gift from my grandmother years earlier that had become my designated champagne flute for special occasions. I froze in the doorway, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. My first thought was that perhaps he was adding sugar or some kind of sweetener, though that made no sense with expensive champagne. But his secretive behavior, the way he looked around nervously before adding the powder, and the fact that he was doctoring only my glass, made it clear that something sinister was happening. My heart began pounding so loudly I was afraid he might hear it. I quietly backed out of the kitchen and returned to the garden, my mind racing through possible explanations. None of them were innocent. Whatever Harold had put in my drink wasn't meant to enhance the champagne experience. When Harold returned to the garden carrying a tray of filled champagne flutes, I watched his every movement like a hawk. He distributed glasses to the guests in a seemingly random pattern, but I noticed he was very careful to keep track of which glass was which. When he approached me, he was holding the glass with my initial, the one I had seen him tamper with. "A toast to our accomplished daughter," Harold announced, his voice carrying to all the guests. His words sounded hollow and rehearsed, nothing like the pride a father should feel at his daughter's graduation. I accepted the glass, but made no move to drink it. Instead, I observed the faces around me, looking for any sign that others might know what was happening. Diane kept glancing between my glass and my face, barely containing what looked like anticipation. Beatrice was checking her watch repeatedly as if timing something. Several family friends appeared uncomfortable, but I couldn't tell if they were aware of any plot or simply picking up on the strange family dynamics. "What's wrong?" Harold asked when I hesitated to drink. "This champagne costs more than your monthly rent." The comment stung because it was true and revealed how closely they had been monitoring my finances. How did he know what I paid for rent? That information wasn't something I had shared with my family recently. "Come on, sis," Diane added with false sweetness. "Don't be dramatic. Just drink it." Her tone was condescending and familiar, the same way she had spoken to me throughout our childhood when she wanted me to do something that would benefit her. The combination of Harold's suspicious behavior, the family's strange reactions, and Diane's urging confirmed my worst fears. I thought back to the conversation I had overheard the night before. She's been taking advantage for too long. Finally, someone will put her in her place. Now everything was beginning to make horrible sense. Standing in my family's backyard holding a glass of champagne that I now knew had been deliberately contaminated, I felt a mixture of terror and rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. But rather than panic or confront them directly, something inside me shifted toward calculated action. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I stood up with the brightest smile I could manage and addressed my sister directly. "You know what, Diane? I want to share this special moment with my wonderful sister who's always been there for me." I walked over to where Diane was standing, champagne glass in hand, speaking loudly enough for all the guests to hear. "Diane, you've been such an inspiration to me throughout my academic journey. Please take my glass. I insist we toast together with matching glasses." The change in Diane's expression was immediate and telling. The smug anticipation vanished, replaced by confusion and then unmistakable panic. "No, Margaret, that's your glass. I already have my own. Please, I absolutely insist." I continued sweetly, practically forcing my glass into her hands while smoothly taking hers. It would mean everything to me to share this moment properly. Harold stepped forward quickly, alarm clear in his voice. "Margaret, that's really not necessary. Everyone has their own glass." "Give Diane her original glass back," Beatrice added sharply, her lawyer training making her sound authoritative even in panic. "I really don't want this one," Diane said, trying to hand the glass back to me, but I had already stepped away. Their desperate reactions confirmed every suspicion I had. If the glass contained nothing more than champagne, why would they care which one I drank from? Their panic was all the evidence I needed. "To family loyalty," I announced, raising Diane's original glass high, "and to everyone getting exactly what they deserve." Cornered and not wanting to appear suspicious in front of 35 guests, Diane reluctantly brought my original glass to her lips. I watched with a mixture of horror and vindication as she drank the champagne that had been intended for me. The next 20 minutes unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. At first, nothing seemed different. Diane participated in conversations and appeared normal. But gradually I noticed her becoming pale and touching her stomach. By the 15-minute mark, she was clearly nauseous, excusing herself from conversations and looking increasingly distressed. When Diane suddenly rushed toward the house, hand over her mouth, Harold and Beatrice immediately followed her. I could hear retching from the direction of the powder room, and soon Harold was calling out to the guests. "I'm afraid Diane has come down with food poisoning," he announced, his voice strained. "We need to get her some medical attention." While my parents were occupied with Diane's crisis, I seized the opportunity to investigate. I had suspicions about what I might find, but I needed evidence. I slipped into Harold's study, a room that had always been off-limits during my childhood. Harold's desk was typically organized, but in his rush to deal with Diane, he had left several items exposed. I immediately spotted a prescription bottle labeled ipecac syrup, with Harold's name on it. The medication was used to induce vomiting, exactly what was happening to Diane. But that discovery was just the beginning. Spread across Harold's desk were legal documents that made my blood run cold. The header read, "Petition for Competency Hearing. Margaret Elizabeth Westfield." The papers outlined a legal strategy to have me declared mentally incompetent with today's party, apparently intended to provide evidence of my instability. My hands shaking, I continued searching through the papers. Bank statements showed detailed tracking of my financial activities, including my rent payments, student loan amounts, and even my grocery purchases. Private investigator reports contained information about my social life, work schedule, and daily routines. They had been watching me like a criminal. Then I found the email chain that revealed the full scope of their betrayal. Harold, Beatrice, and a private attorney had been corresponding about their plan for months. The emails discussed making me appear mentally unstable at the graduation party, using any resulting breakdown as evidence for the competency hearing, and ultimately gaining control of my educational credentials and financial future. But the most devastating discovery was still to come. At the bottom of the email chain, I found references to a trust fund that I had never known existed. My grandmother, who had died when I was 25, had apparently left me $200,000 in a trust that became accessible on my 25th birthday. Further investigation revealed bank statements showing that my parents had been collecting money from this trust for the past 3 years, claiming management fees and administrative costs. They had watched me struggle financially, working multiple jobs, and taking out student loans while sitting on an inheritance that rightfully belonged to me. The emails revealed that Diane had been promised half of the trust money in exchange for her cooperation in the competency scheme. This explained her smugness and anticipation throughout the day. She wasn't just watching me get drugged, she was expecting to profit from it. I quickly took photos of every document with my phone, making sure to capture clear images of the bank statements, legal papers, and email correspondence. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. As I was finishing my documentation, I heard footsteps approaching the study. I quickly gathered the papers and returned them to their approximate original positions, then slipped out of the room just as Harold was returning from dealing with Diane. My mind was reeling from what I had discovered, but I knew I needed to act quickly and decisively. This wasn't just about a drug drink anymore. This was about years of financial theft, elaborate fraud, and a conspiracy to destroy my independence and future. I called my law school friend Jennifer, who was working at a criminal defense firm in Hartford. When she answered, I quickly explained the situation and asked for immediate advice. "Margaret, you need to call the police right now," she said without hesitation. "What you're describing is theft, fraud, and attempted assault. Don't let them clean up the evidence." Armed with legal advice and photographic evidence, I returned to the backyard where the guests were milling around, uncertainly concerned about Diane's sudden illness and the family's strange behavior. I walked back to the party with my phone full of evidence and a clarity I had never felt before. The guests were clustered in small groups, whispering among themselves about Diane's sudden illness and the family's abrupt disappearance. Several people approached me with concerned questions about what was happening. Rather than make excuses or try to cover for my family's behavior, I decided to tell the truth to everyone present. These people had come to celebrate my achievement, and they deserved to know what kind of people they had been socializing with. "Everyone, I need to share something important with you," I announced loudly enough for all 35 guests to hear. The conversation stopped, and all attention turned to me. I have just discovered that my parents have been stealing from me for 3 years. I began holding up my phone with the bank statements visible. They have taken $200,000 from an inheritance my grandmother left me, and today they attempted to drug me to make me appear mentally unstable. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several guests gasped audibly. Dr. Williams, my thesis advisor, stepped forward with concern. "Margaret, these are very serious allegations. Do you have evidence?" I showed him the prescription bottle I had retrieved from Harold's study, then read portions of the email exchanges aloud. The legal terminology was clear enough that several guests who had professional backgrounds immediately understood the implications. "These documents appear authentic," Dr. Williams confirmed after examining them. "Margaret, have you contacted the authorities?" Before I could answer, Harold and Beatrice emerged from the house, having heard my announcements from inside. Their faces showed a mixture of panic and rage. "Margaret is having some kind of breakdown," Harold announced to the guests, trying to regain control of the narrative. "This is exactly the kind of erratic behavior we've been worried about. She's been under tremendous academic pressure," Beatrice added, her lawyer training helping her sound authoritative. "These accusations are clearly paranoid delusions brought on by stress." From behind them, Diane appeared still pale and weak from the ipecac, but determined to support her parents' story. "She's always been jealous and unstable," she said weakly. "This is typical Margaret drama." But their attempt to discredit me fell flat in front of witnesses who had seen my academic performance and professional demeanor. Several guests were already examining the evidence I had shared, and their expressions showed belief rather than doubt. "I'm calling the police right now," I announced, pulling out my phone. "This is theft fraud and attempted assault, and I have witnesses and evidence." The panic in my family's faces escalated immediately. Harold tried one last desperate threat. "If you do this, you'll get absolutely nothing from us. We'll make sure you're destroyed professionally. We'll ruin your reputation and your career prospects," Beatrice added. "No one will hire you after we're done. No one will believe you over us," Diane chimed in weakly. I looked at them calmly and said words that felt like the first honest thing I had spoken to them in years. "You already tried to destroy me. The difference is now I have proof and I have witnesses who know the truth." I dialed 911 while 35 people watched. When the dispatcher answered, I calmly explained that I needed to report theft fraud and attempted poisoning and that I had evidence and witnesses available. The police arrived within 20 minutes, responding to what they initially thought might be a domestic disturbance, but quickly recognizing as something much more serious. I presented my evidence systematically to the responding officers. The bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals, the private investigator reports proving surveillance, the prescription bottle with Harold's name, and witness testimony about the suspicious champagne incident. Officer Martinez, who seemed to be the senior officer, examined each piece of evidence carefully. "Ma'am, these appear to be serious criminal charges. We're going to need to take formal statements from everyone involved." Harold made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Officer, this is a family misunderstanding. Margaret has been under stress, and we can work this out privately. I'm willing to make financial restitution right now." "Sir, attempted poisoning isn't something that gets worked out privately," Officer Martinez replied firmly. "And based on these bank records, we're looking at felony theft charges." Beatrice tried to use her legal credentials to intimidate the officers. "I'm an attorney, and I can tell you that these allegations won't hold up in court. This is a daughter having emotional problems, nothing more." "Ma'am, being an attorney makes this worse, not better," Officer Martinez responded. "You should have known that what you did was illegal." As statements were taken from multiple witnesses, the story became clear to the officers. Diane, still sick from the ipecac and facing the reality of criminal charges, began to crack under pressure. "I didn't know they were going to drug her," she admitted tearfully. "I just knew about the money. They promised me $50,000 if I helped with the competency thing." Her admissions sealed their fate. Harold was arrested on charges of theft fraud and reckless endangerment. Beatrice was charged with conspiracy and faced additional professional misconduct allegations. Diane was initially detained, but later released with immunity in exchange for her cooperation as a witness. As I watched my parents being read their rights and placed in the back of police cars, I felt something I had never experienced before: complete freedom from their manipulation and control. The approval I had spent 28 years seeking was revealed to be worthless, and I was finally free to build a life based on my own values and achievements. 3 months later, I sat in the Waterbury Superior Court, watching my parents enter plea negotiations with the district attorney. The case had attracted significant media attention due to the unusual nature of the crimes and the professional backgrounds of the defendants. Harold had been charged with first-degree theft conspiracy to commit fraud and reckless endangerment. The evidence was overwhelming, and his attorney was recommending a plea agreement to avoid a lengthy trial. Beatrice faced similar charges, plus professional misconduct allegations that would likely result in disbarment. I had spent the intervening months working with prosecutors to build the strongest possible case. The investigation had uncovered even more evidence of their financial manipulation, including forged documents and additional unauthorized transactions. The total amount stolen from my inheritance, including lost investment opportunities, exceeded $300,000. My attorney, Jennifer Morrison, had become more than just legal counsel. She had helped me understand the emotional aspects of financial abuse and connected me with resources for recovery. "What your parents did goes beyond theft," she explained. This was systematic psychological manipulation designed to keep you dependent and controllable. The court proceedings were methodical and thorough. Harold's defense attorney tried to portray him as a concerned father who had made poor decisions while trying to protect his daughter's financial interests. The bank records and email evidence made this argument impossible to sustain. When Harold took the stand in his own defense, his testimony was devastating to his case. Under cross-examination, he admitted to tracking my financial activities, hiring private investigators to monitor my behavior, and planning the competency hearing. His explanation that he was protecting family assets fell apart when prosecutors showed how the money had been spent on family luxuries rather than legitimate investments. Beatrice's testimony was even more damaging. Her legal training meant she couldn't claim ignorance of the law, and her role in structuring the fraud scheme showed premeditation and sophistication. The State Bar Association had already begun disbarment proceedings based on the criminal charges. Diane's cooperation as a witness was crucial to the prosecution's case. Under immunity, she testified about years of manipulation by our parents, describing how they had pitted us against each other and used financial incentives to ensure her loyalty. Her testimony revealed that the competency scheme had been planned for over a year. They told me Margaret was taking advantage of the family. Diane testified, tears streaming down her face. They said she was using her education to make us look bad and that she needed to be stopped. I believed them because I wanted the money they promised me. The financial evidence was presented in detail, showing exactly how my inheritance had been stolen and spent. Forensic accountants had traced every transaction, revealing that my parents had used my grandmother's money for home renovations, luxury vacations, and Diane's college expenses, while I struggled with student loans and part-time jobs. During the victim impact phase, I was given the opportunity to address the court directly. I had prepared extensively for this moment, wanting to convey not just the financial damage, but the emotional trauma of being betrayed by the people who should have protected me. Your Honor, the financial theft was devastating, but the emotional manipulation was worse, I began. My parents watched me work multiple jobs, take out crushing student loans, and struggle to afford basic necessities while they had access to money that rightfully belonged to me. They didn't just steal my inheritance, they stole years of my life that I spent believing I wasn't worthy of their love or support. I continued. The graduation party was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life. Instead, it became the day I discovered that my own family had been plotting to destroy my independence and future. The fact that they were willing to drug me to achieve their goals shows the depths of their manipulation. The judge listened intently as I described the impact on my life and future. I've had to rebuild my relationship with trust with family and with my own self-worth. But I've also discovered strength I never knew I had, and I've learned that real family is about love and support, not control and manipulation. When sentencing day arrived, the courtroom was packed with supporters from my Yale community and new friends I had made during the legal process. Harold received 18 months in prison, followed by 5 years of probation with orders to pay full restitution, plus punitive damages totaling $450,000. Beatrice was sentenced to 12 months in prison and permanent disbarment from practicing law. The financial recovery exceeded my expectations. Beyond the original inheritance plus interest, the court awarded significant punitive damages and attorney fees. Harold and Beatrice were forced to sell their Greenwich mansion and liquidate other assets to meet the restitution requirements. More importantly, the legal process had validated my experiences and given me closure. For the first time in my life, I had official recognition that their treatment of me had been wrong and criminal. The approval I had spent years seeking was replaced by something much more valuable: self-respect and financial independence. As I left the courthouse after sentencing, I felt genuinely free for the first time in my adult life. I had a substantial financial foundation, a career opportunity at a respected financial crimes investigation unit, and most importantly, the knowledge that I could trust my own judgment and instincts. 6 months after the sentencing, I was settling into my new life in Boston with a sense of peace I had never experienced. My apartment in the Back Bay was modest but entirely mine, furnished with pieces I had chosen and paid for with money that legitimately belonged to me. Every morning I woke up grateful for the independence I had fought to achieve. My job as a financial compliance officer with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office had become more than just employment. It was a calling that allowed me to use my traumatic experience to help other victims of financial abuse. My case had become a training example for law enforcement agencies throughout New England, and I regularly spoke at conferences about recognizing and investigating financial fraud within families. The work was emotionally challenging but deeply satisfying. I reviewed cases involving elderly parents being swindled by their children's spouses hiding assets during divorces, and adult children being manipulated through financial control. Each case reminded me that my experience, while painful, had given me unique insights that could help others. My relationship with Diane had slowly begun to heal, though it remained complicated. She had started therapy to process her own manipulation by our parents, and was working to rebuild her life without their financial support. We met for coffee once a month, carefully reconstructing a relationship based on honesty rather than the competition our parents had fostered. "I'm sorry I believed them about you," she said during one of our recent meetings. "I was so focused on getting their approval and the money they promised that I didn't see how wrong it all was." I had learned to forgive Diane while maintaining appropriate boundaries. She was as much a victim of our parents' manipulation as I was, even though she had benefited from it initially. Her cooperation during the trial had been crucial, and her testimony had helped ensure that justice was served. The financial recovery had exceeded $400,000 after all penalties and interest were calculated. I had invested the money conservatively, purchased a small house in a quiet neighborhood, and established an emergency fund that gave me genuine security for the first time in my adult life. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents' attempt to control me financially had ultimately given me more financial freedom than I could have achieved on my own. Professional opportunities had emerged from the publicity surrounding my case. I had been invited to join the board of a nonprofit organization that helped victims of financial abuse, and I was considering writing a book about my experience. The MBA that my family had tried to use against me had become the foundation for a career helping others navigate similar challenges. The most unexpected development was the relationship I had built with my Yale professor, Dr. Williams, who had become a mentor and father figure. He and his wife had invited me to family dinners and holiday celebrations, showing me what healthy family relationships actually looked like. Through them, I was learning that family could be about support and encouragement, rather than control and manipulation. My dating life remained cautious but hopeful. The experience with my family had made me hyper-aware of manipulation and control in relationships, but it had also given me clear standards for what I deserved. I was learning to trust my instincts and to value partners who celebrated my independence, rather than trying to undermine it. Harold and Beatrice had served their prison sentences and were now dealing with the long-term consequences of their actions. Harold's business had collapsed during his incarceration, and Beatrice's disbarment meant she could never practice law again. They had lost their social standing, their professional reputations, and most of their assets. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, but I also felt no guilt about the consequences of their choices. The legal system had worked exactly as it should. Justice had been served, victims had been protected, and criminals had been held accountable. My decision to call the police that day at the graduation party had been vindicated completely. Looking back on the experience, I realized that my parents had actually done me a favor by revealing their true nature so dramatically. If they had continued their manipulation more subtly, I might have spent years trying to earn approval that would never come. Their greed and desperation had forced a confrontation that freed me from a lifetime of psychological manipulation. The graduation party that was supposed to celebrate my academic achievement had instead become the day I graduated from being their victim to being my own person. I had learned that family isn't defined by shared DNA, but by shared love and respect. The family I was building now through friendships and mentoring relationships, and my slowly healing relationship with Diane was based on choice and mutual support rather than obligation and control. I had also learned to trust my instincts completely. When something felt wrong, it usually was. When people showed me who they were through their actions, I believed them. The skills I had developed in recognizing manipulation and financial abuse had made me stronger and more perceptive in all areas of my life. Most importantly, I had discovered that seeking approval from people who were incapable of giving genuine love was a waste of precious time and energy. The love and respect I had been seeking from my parents was something I could give to myself and receive from people who were worthy of my trust. Standing in my kitchen on a quiet Sunday morning making coffee in my own home with money I had rightfully earned and recovered, I felt genuinely happy for the first time in my adult life. The journey had been painful, and it had led me to a place of authentic peace and self-respect that no one could take away from me. I thought about the graduation speech I had planned to give that day about gratitude and family support and achieving dreams. The speech I would give now would be completely different. It would be about courage, self-advocacy, and the importance of choosing your own family based on love rather than obligation. If someone had told me 6 months earlier that having my parents arrested at my graduation party would be the best thing that ever happened to me, I would have thought they were crazy. But sometimes the worst betrayal becomes the greatest gift because it forces you to stop seeking love in places where it will never be found and start building it in places where it can flourish. I had learned that sometimes the family you choose is infinitely more powerful and supportive than the family you're born into. And sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up setting you free in ways you never could have imagined. The most beautiful part of my new life was its authenticity. Every relationship was built on choice rather than obligation. Every achievement was genuinely my own. Every day was lived according to my values rather than someone else's manipulation. I had traded the approval of people who didn't deserve my respect for the respect of people who truly mattered. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where family members make you feel unworthy or less than valuable, please trust your instincts. You deserve love, support, and genuine care. And if you're not receiving those things from the people who should provide them naturally, it's okay to create that support system elsewhere. Sometimes the family you choose becomes more meaningful and powerful than the family you're born into, and sometimes the people who try hardest to control you end up giving you the greatest freedom when you finally break away from their manipulation. What's your experience with family dynamics? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity and building authentic relationships. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from the people in their lives. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you trust your own instincts and value your own worth. Remember, sometimes the most difficult experiences lead to the most beautiful transformations, and you have the strength to create the life and relationships you truly deserve.